Okay, let's go a little mailbag. How we're going to do this, fire in those DMs at John Middlekauff on Instagram, and get your question answered here on the show. Very, very easy. Why does Trevor Lawrence get a pass with the majority of the media? He has more turnovers 10 than touchdowns 9. In this season, people still talk about him like he's more than a game manager. His stats are identical to Mac Jones through 40 games. He clearly has a top 10 offensive weapons in the league, and his defense has been mostly solid. Is it simply because he's been so hyped up since his high school years, or is it the media's inability to admit they overhyped a player? The upside is clearly there, but getting tired of people acting like he's already there. Well, whenever I talk to buddies in the NFL, and I was always victim of this, as like it comes naturally to me to get in on the hype cycle and hype things up. The NFL is not big on hype. Like you can't go to a draft room and just use hype. Like, this guy's really sweet. This guy, number 1 overall pick. This guy's a top 10 pick. Well, why? Explain it to me. Show me. Right? And most people of us that talk about it for a living, but specifically, people that don't know anything about football, it's easy to just kind of ride that avalanche of a hype train. And his hype train got pretty high. Now, people I knew in the NFL loved him as a prospect. He is a legit prospect coming out of college. The height, the weight, the athleticism, his arm is really good. I wouldn't call it great. The accuracy, but let's face it, there is some deer in the headlights moments with him. And when you hit him, now you could argue when you hit any quarterback, but a lot of times with a mobile quarterback, they should be able to kind of create some things and get away from some things like Mahomes can do, like Josh Allen can do, like Lamar Jackson can do, like Russell Wilson used to do, why the Browns gave Deshaun Watson all that money to do. Kyler Murray, make some shit happen. And you watch games like yesterday, which is his low point, but it's like, bro, you got anything else in the bag? And so I'm with you. It's sometimes you can watch something like that and go, I don't see it. And yesterday I was getting texts from scouts that are like, God, this guy's really overrated. And you're not alone. Now, I compare him to Mac Jones. There ain't a team in the league. There's not a coach in the league. There's not a GM in the league. There's not an owner in the league. If you had Trevor Lawrence and the other team had Mac Jones, no one would trade Trevor Lawrence for Mac Jones. Not a soul. Not one. And this is why you can't box score scout. One guy is way more talented. Like Mac Jones doesn't have that much talent relative to NFL players. He's a low-end talent. Not debatable. That's an objective fact. Average arm, not great movement, not that accurate, not an explosive player, not that instinctive, clearly. So I think that's a little harsh, but I hear what you're saying. Numbers don't lie sometimes. A huge Niner fan. Wanted to ask your thoughts on Jaden Daniels, and if you think Kyle would be able to develop a quarterback like him. I know we have Purdy, but do you think we could trade Purdy and a pick to try to get Jaden Daniels, or would it even be worth it? By the way, any meat we can get, any way we can get more content, have really good insight of what goes through the league. Appreciate you. I would say no. Kyle Shanahan loves Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is going nowhere. They're not going to trade for a quarterback unless he gets seriously injured. So Brock Purdy is going to be the 49ers quarterback for these next couple of years. I mean, he makes $800,000. And I mean, against the Jags, he was freaking awesome. He outplayed Trevor Lawrence. So I'm not acting like the guy's Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, but he's just not going anywhere. And they're not going to get in the quarterback carousel after going through the Jimmy Trey Lance situation. They feel comfortable with this guy. The team really likes him. That's the other thing. Like Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, Trent, their best players swear by this guy. So when you get the buy-in from your star players on a quarterback and he's not a scrub, you got to write it out and see what he can do. And I would say this. Some of Brock's picks have been atrocious. And the one in Minnesota, now he had a concussion. He threw 2 picks. But the ones in Cincinnati were just inexcusable. And it wasn't all his fault. The defense was atrocious. But it definitely sealed the deal. But he's a really explosive quarterback. He averages, you just look at the box score after most games. He's like 10, 11 yards an attempt. You look at a lot of these quarterbacks, like 6, 7 yards attempts. He pushes the ball down the field. He throws bombs. relative to the 49ers offense, which has always kind of been a little dink and dunk with Jimmy and Kyle. Huge Steeler fan. But I wanted to get your thoughts on Kenny Pickett. The last 2 games has been some of the worst games of his career. He's missing throws, walking into sacks, etc. Also, weird stat of his. In his last 12 games that he finishes the games, he's 11-1. Well, I think we've talked about this before. I didn't watch that much of the game yesterday just because I'm not watching the Packers. I'm not watching Jordan Love. And I've watched you guys for 30 plus years. Favre, Rodgers, they mattered. From what I do, I've talked about them nonstop on this show. When I was in the NFL, they were just something we were always talking about. When I was on radio, they mattered. They were one of the biggest brands in the NFL. And their brand is still massive, but the team is unwatchable. I'm not a Jordan Love guy. Don't see it. He will not be the quarterback next year. But when they're playing somebody, they're to me like a third TV team. Like it just peek over there. I don't think the Packers are going to win. Like you guys were never going to lose that game. I don't care how close it got. I don't care how great the DB play was to bounce it off him to get the pick at the end of the game. But I don't see it, man. I just with Jordan Love. Kenny Pickett, he's had some remarkable fourth quarter drives after playing shitty. So you've won a lot of those games. So a lot of that 11-1 is a lot of bad games and then coming through in the clutch. I don't know, man. I think there's a little, when you get in business with the Mac Joneses, with the Jimmy Garoppolos, with the Kenny Pickett's, everything with Derek Carr, everything has to be perfect around them for them to excel. Offensive line, running back, weapons, offensive coordinator / play calling. It all has to be in sync because if it's not, it will not look good. If one thing is off, right? For Mac Jones, he's not that good. Coordinator, Bill O'Brien, probably not that good. Team's not that good. You're just going to lose every week. Kenny Pickett, you have good talent around him. Warren can make plays. Pickens can make plays. Deontay Thompson can make plays. The defense can make plays. But the coordinator's not great. And then his confidence wanes. And he's not talented enough to kind of pull stuff out of his ass. So my issue always is whenever you draft an average talent super high, you're going to have more downs than ups. You just are. So I was not a big Kenny Pickett guy coming out of college, though I kind of bought into it this offseason, and I was just wrong. I should have stuck with my guns. Those aren't my type quarterbacks. They really struggle to excel in the NFL. I would say Cousins is kind of an outlier over the last 15 years, right? For a guy that's not. Drew Brees is like the best version, short, average arm. Cousins is bigger, and his arm got better as he got older. But for the most part, those guys don't really excel. They just don't. It's very, very difficult to have a good career. Hey, John, got one for the mailbag. Did Colin put a moratorium on talking about anything related to Deshaun Watson? I feel like Lamar had beat the best defense in football. It would have been a big point of praise for you to recap. Seriously, an hour show and you don't talk about the best game of the day with the biggest playoff implications seems like malpractice and blatant disregard for football fans who would have loved to hear your thoughts on the most physical game with the biggest stars. Would love to know. No, there's never any moratorium. I talked about it earlier on this show. You can see it either on the podcast or one of our other videos. I give you my thoughts on Deshaun Watson and the Ravens, but we just talk about what we're talking about. I just talk about what we're excited to talk about. We can't make everybody happy. I don't think it's malpractice. It just didn't come up. Other things came up. And I'm sorry, Browns fans. You don't just get to be shitty for 20 years and win a big game and think everyone has to talk about you. You gave $230 million to a fucking quarterback who had half of Texas coming after his ass. So, you're going to get some more negativity than positivity. You ain't the Yankees. You ain't the Lakers. This isn't the Cowboys. The football business has been booming without you guys. So sometimes you get forgotten. You just do. Why do the Ravens tend to probably get more praise than you guys? I don't know. Google their resume. It's nothing personal against the franchise. It's all based on history. In your history, pretty freaking ugly. Is Mike Tomlin the most underrated coach in the NFL today? I don't know why I got so mad they were talking about the Browns. He's winning with Kenny Pickett, and I don't see as a major upgrade over Mac Jones. Yet the Steelers and the Patriots are headed in the opposite direction. In 23, if Belichick and Tomlin were both available to coach my franchise, I'd go with Mike. He's never had a losing season and seems to understand the importance of being able to communicate. Am I crazy to think Mike is better than Bill at this point in time in his career? Two things Mike has. Clearly, Bill is over dealing with players, any issues, him and Mac, like he's not dealing with young guys and dealing with their shit. And Tomlin is clearly a just easier dude to talk to, right? And Mike is not Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky either, right? It's not all sunshine and rainbows with Mike Tomlin. But I think it's easier for him to deal with guys than it is Belichick in 2023, right? And that matters because of just the way guys are wired, young people coming into the league. The other thing Mike has that Bill refuses to have, Mike doesn't pick the players. They've had a strong GM. Their owner plays a big role in philosophically who they draft. Belichick, every single player on that team is rubber stamped by William Belichick. Mike Tomlin ain't picking every player. So the reason the Steelers have been so talented my entire life, from Cowher to Tomlin, is their GM plays a role. Their front office plays a role. Front office ain't fucking doing shit in New England. Bill's picking the players. Bill's picking them all. So it's like, yeah, Bill as a coach, right? Just coaching a team on a given week. If you gave Tomlin the same team as Bill, Tomlin's team's way better. Why? Because he ain't picking the player. Most coaches can't pick the players, right? You don't want most coaches picking all the players, right? I'm not saying they don't have influence, but most coaches would be bad GMs. Bill has proven in his 70s to be currently an awful GM. Tomlin doesn't even have to be the GM. Why? Because I got guys to do that. I feel like due to quarterback inflation, we try and convince ourselves on these quarterbacks every year when time and time, history shows 2, maybe 3 of these quarterbacks will be serviceable at best. Caleb Williams never jumped off my screen as a super talent, as a super elite talent. Every good defense he plays, he crumbles. And then we get Drake Maye. I've lived in Raleigh, ACC country, and they simply don't play anybody. It's literally Mitch Trubisky all over again. I just think we overvalue almost purely based on the description, on the desperation. What do you think? Are most of these guys overhyped? I remember watching Drake Maye. Who were they playing? Whatever game they lost. They lost to Wake Forest. I forget. They lost NC State. I forget their first loss. They lost another game since, and hell, they almost lost the other night. I think to Duke in overtime. I was excited to watch him, and I'd watched clips and bits and pieces of his games. But I mean, start to finish, I forget who they were playing. It was whoever they lost to first on the CW. He was just not very good relative to the hype. Again, good prospect. He's 6'5", he's big, he's got a solid arm. But I wasn't going, God, this is the next coming of Andrew Luck. This is the next Josh Allen. Like, good player, potentially goes to the right spot. Caleb, I've been all over the place on Caleb. I'll say this watching the Oregon game. Their offensive line, there were dudes on Oregon. There was a guy minimum every play in the backfield. I mean, their offensive line is so shitty at USC. Lincoln Riley should be ashamed of himself. Whoever their offensive line coach is should be relieved of his duties, because Caleb Williams was running for his life. And I saw Daniel Jeremiah, who I used to work with in Philly and I've known forever, say, I want to evaluate Caleb inside the pocket. We know outside the pocket, ad-libbing, he's elite. But in the NFL, the game is a lot of the game, even though like Mahomes, Allen, all these guys, Burrow, make plays outside the pocket. But you do have to excel inside the pocket. How do you excel inside the pocket if there's a dude hitting you every single play? So I think he's overhyped. He's a 6-foot quarterback. Yeah, he's got great skills, big arm, accurate down the field, strong, he's thick. But we anoint all these guys next Peyton Manning, next Andrew Luck. No, none of these guys are. Caleb Williams is a really good prospect. Drake Maye is a really good prospect. But there are definitely red flags. You better have a good team. You better have a good coach. Better have a good play caller. Look at Bryce Young. I liked him a lot in college. I underestimated how tiny he would look. But then he goes, Frank, I'm sorry, I don't think Frank Reich's any good. Their talent definitely is not any good. So if you don't have the physical skills, and I put you on that team, like Caleb Williams is a much better prospect than Bryce Young. But if I put Caleb Williams on Carolina, they would be shitty. They wouldn't be any good. They might be a little better, but they wouldn't be that much better. And you never know. The other thing you can't value because it's impossible are the intangibles, your focus, your drive, your ability to study. Like one thing I heard T-Bob on the Guys on Snaps talking about, and he's a big LSU guy. He played there and he covers them, on a local radio show. So he just knows a lot about the program. Is like Jaden Daniels studying film 3 days a week, like 5:30 in the morning. He put a lot of emphasis on his game and getting better, right? So that matters. Most of the great players in my lifetime really try. Patrick Mahomes gives you A+ effort. He gives you everything he's got. Joe Burrow, all in on football. Same with Trevor Lawrence. He even said, like, football's not my everything. Well, I'm sorry. I'm going to give you $200 million. Someone's giving me $200 million to do, let's say, I'm a podcaster. So if you're going to give me $200 million, you're getting my fucking all. It's my life. Saying, this is little balance. That's part of life. Like everyone, and I know it's very in vogue, like balance in life. Yeah, for sure. If you work 9 to 5, I don't expect you to take home your company's problems. That's on them. Especially if you're not making that much money. You can do whatever you want. Punch in, punch out, that's fine. But when you get paid millions upon millions, it's the organization's fault if they give that money to a guy that's not all in. Like Peyton Manning was addicted. Tom Brady, addicted. Steph Curry, addicted. Not the biggest LeBron guy, but I give him credit. Like he's all in. Well, unless your team sucks, then he'll pivot and quit. But if your team's good, he gives you max effort. He gives you max energy toward his craft. Like when you get to high dollar amounts, the pie chart of your balance in life better lean to whatever you're getting paid to do. I'm sorry if that makes some people uncomfortable. Hell, when I was making no money in this profession, wanting to make it, when I was in the NFL to when I started talking about football, like my balance was kind of limited. I don't go on that many vacations. My life, in my 20s and 30s, was dedicated around football for 6-8 months a year. Limited stuff going on. That's part of life. It's just that's the way it goes. Now, there have been a lot of players in sports that aren't addicted. And most of those guys, I would say, underachieve. And a lot of those guys, when they get paid big money, never live up to the billing. Why? Because it's impossible to be great, in my opinion, if you're not addicted to your craft. It just is. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are certain crafts where you can get away with it. And again, part of like my job now, having interesting stuff to talk to. I'm not saying like I don't go out to dinner or don't go play golf sometimes and hang out. It's not what I'm saying. But there's no vacations on Saturday and Sunday for me. Because listen, I'm not acting like I'm digging ditches. I'm not. But like I got to watch football. That's my job. Whatever your job is, if you want to have success, it probably takes, an allotment of your time that is more than some will be willing to do. And that's just the reality with some of these prospects when you evaluate, right? So if Drake Maye or Caleb Williams or Bo Nix or Michael Penix or Jaden Daniels or JJ McCarthy or whoever these players are, because a lot of them, like I've seen all of them, they all have a lot of talent, right? Caleb, big arm. Drake, pretty good arm. Bo Nix, Penix can throw the ball well. All good athletes. JJ McCarthy, same thing. Like, are these guys going to be addicted to their craft? Are they going to fucking give everything they have to the sport of football? Because if they do, and that doesn't even guarantee you anything, but if they do, they're going to have a chance. Because that's what most of the good to great players have had in the NFL, right? Like, I'll give you an example. Like Derek Carr. I think he devotes a large percentage of his time, of his life, to his craft. He's just not good enough anymore. And whether that's because he flinches now in the pocket, because he doesn't trust some of his previous injuries, whatever, he's just not as good as he once was, right? But it's not like he maximized his talent. Do you just think, do the Vikings just let Cousins walk and keep Dobbs? Well, they can't trade Cousins because his contract runs out and he's not franchisable. So I think they're in a complicated situation. And he was going to be really expensive when you factored in how well he was playing. But the Achilles changes a lot. I know Aaron Rodgers thinks he can come back in 3 months from an Achilles injury. Most guys take a year. And most guys after that year aren't as good. Take a couple years, right? And depending on who you are, your athleticism, your physical makeup, things I can't even pretend to know about, you might never be the same, right? Now, there was a lot of wear and tear on Kobe Bryant, but he was obviously never the same after that injury. Klay Thompson, who had less wear and tear than Kobe, has never even remotely been the same after his Achilles injury. So Kirk Cousins' game is not predicated like theirs on jumping and cutting, but still, like, I mean, it's pretty important. And I have a lot of respect for him, how much he maximized his game, how good he became. But I'd be lying if I said I was confident that he's going to come back and be a Pro Bowl level guy, right? And just like if I was them, would I be comfortable? What's the number? Because would I take him back on 1 year, $10 million deal or something like that? 100%. But am I doing a 1 year, $30 million deal for a guy coming off Achilles that's 36 years old? Josh Dobbs, what did we say about it last week? It's having the skill of being adaptable. Something I don't know about you guys, I struggle with. You know, sometimes like I can be very rigid, but just, hey, deal with whatever's thrown at you. Just roll with the punches, which is easier said than done, right? Getting traded, new playbook, not knowing guys' names. Most of us, that would be very, very difficult. I don't care how good a character guy you are, how open-minded you are, how willing you are to work. That would have been very difficult. And he's having one of the cooler seasons in like NFL history. Not one of the best. Like he's not throwing for 50 touchdowns or he's going to win a Super Bowl. But I think he's just having a season like, remember Joshua Dobbs in 2023? You know that meme that's going around right now with Vince McMahon of him talking about The Undertaker and being choked up? Like, you do that when you talk about Joshua Dobbs in 2023. Dude's like a guy was, I wouldn't even say written off. He was just irrelevant. And then you just find out more about the guy. I don't know why I just couldn't get words out of my mouth. And he's easy to root for. Then he gets traded after they said they wouldn't trade him. I mean, 2 weeks ago, Jonathan Gannon told him he wouldn't trade him. And then he told me I was going to start. And then he starts naming the other guy's starters. And he goes to Minnesota, which is a way better spot than Arizona, given that they're going to make the playoffs. I watched a decent amount of that game because I was interested in New Orleans. They were beating the shit out of the Saints. They were clowning the Saints. It was 24-3. It wasn't even close. If it wouldn't have been for Jameis coming into that game and giving them a little life, I think the Vikings might have won that thing like 40-10. But what a story, man. What a cool story. What an easy guy to root for. That's what sports needs more of. Just easy guys to root for. Bo Nix favored to win the Heisman. If not him, then who? I think it's him and Jaden. I think it's kind of a two-horse race. I guess Penix would still be somewhat alive. They play Oregon State this week. At Oregon State, Oregon State's like 12 in the country. Then they finish with the Apple Cup against Washington State. And then if they win those two games, they'll be in the conference championship game. I thought the voting happens before the conference championship game, but I could be wrong. I guess the voting happens before the bowl games and the playoffs. That's what it is. So the conference championship games count. But I would say that if my bet right now, I would lean Bo Nix. But I think Jaden Daniels is having himself a moment. And to me, the only difference is if they win the Pac-12, I think Bo Nix is the guy. And if he goes on to beat Oregon State in 2 weeks and then beat Washington, Jaden won't have that ability because Alabama, the SEC championship game is now set. It's Alabama versus Georgia. So pretty crazy. If I would have told you 2 years ago that Jaden Daniels was going to win the Heisman Trophy, not a soul, or Bo Nix. Honestly, it would have been crazier to say Bo Nix. Those two guys are going to be at the Heisman ceremony, and it's basically they're going to get the majority of the votes. That's wild. That really is. Shows you the transfer portal has done wonders for quarterbacks. It's done wonders for a lot of players, but it's changed the game for quarterbacks who have failed in a spot, who need a change of scenery, and then go on to just kill it and then make it to the Heisman house. Appreciate everyone listening. Adios.